Born into Hollywood royalty on December 21, 1937, Jane Seymour Fonda was destined for a life in the spotlight, yet her journey to becoming a cultural icon was anything but easy. The daughter of legendary actor Henry Fonda and Canadian-born socialite Frances Ford Seymour, Jane's early life was marked by a sense of emotional distance and tragedy. Her mother died by suicide when Jane was just 12 years old, a devastating event that would shape her emotional landscape and ignite a lifelong quest for purpose and understanding. Growing up in the shadow of her famous father, Jane developed a complicated relationship with both fame and family. Though she admired Henry Fonda's craft, she often struggled with his aloof demeanor and the pressures of living up to his legacy. Initially, acting was not her ambition. She studied art at Vassar College and later traveled to Paris to study painting. However, her trajectory changed when she returned to New York and began studying at the Actor Studio under the guidance of the legendary Lee Strasberg. It was here that Jane discovered a deep connection to performance, not just as a craft, but as a form of emotional liberation. Jane Fonda's acting debut came in 1960 with the Broadway play There Was a Little Girl, which earned her a Tony nomination. That same year, she made her film debut in Tall Story, a romantic comedy opposite Anthony Perkins. While her early roles often cast her as the stereotypical blonde ingenue in light-hearted comedies like Barefoot in the Park, 1967, and Cat Ballou, 1965, Fonda was determined to break free from the constraints of her image and prove her dramatic range. Her transformation from sex symbol to serious actress was gradual but deliberate. She took on more complex roles that challenged both her and the audience's perceptions, culminating in a breakthrough performance in They Shoot Horses, Don't They, 1969, which earned her an Academy Award nomination. Her portrayal of a high-end prostitute in Clute, 1971, marked a turning point in her career. Not only did she win her first Academy Award for Best Actress, but the role established her as a serious and daring performer, unafraid to confront controversial topics. Her commitment to roles that reflected social realities coincided with her growing political activism, particularly against the Vietnam War. By the early 1970s, Jane Fonda was not only a critically acclaimed actress, but also a polarizing public figure, often at the center of fierce political debate. Despite the backlash and personal attacks she faced for her activism, Jane continued to forge a path that fused artistry with advocacy. Her entrepreneurial spirit also began to emerge during this era, especially with the founding of her production company, IPC Films, which allowed her to take greater control over the types of stories she wanted to tell. She produced and starred in films such as Coming Home, 1978, which addressed the emotional toll of war and earned her a second Oscar. In the late 1970s and early 1980s, Fonda further expanded her influence by launching a fitness empire with the release of Jane Fonda's Workout. The home video became a cultural phenomenon, helping to popularize aerobics and making her a household name beyond cinema. Though it may have seemed a surprising turn for an actress of her caliber, the fitness boom not only rejuvenated her brand but also empowered a generation of women to take control of their physical and mental health. Jane Fonda's early career was a masterclass in reinvention. From reluctant heiress to aspiring painter, from comedic starlet to Oscar-winning powerhouse, and from political lightning rod to fitness mogul, she emerged as one of the most multifaceted women of her time. Her biography and beginnings are not merely the story of an actress climbing the ranks of Hollywood. They are the story of a woman battling personal demons, defying expectations, and laying the foundation for a career defined by both courage and transformation. The peak of Jane Fonda's illustrious career in the 1970s and early 1980s was marked by an extraordinary fusion of artistic brilliance, political courage, and cultural influence that few in Hollywood or beyond could match. Having firmly shed the image of the ingenue, Fonda emerged during this period not only as one of the most respected actresses of her generation, but also as a symbol of fearless defiance and unwavering commitment to truth, justice, and personal authenticity. Her ascent to the pinnacle of Hollywood began in earnest with Clute, 1971, in which her portrayal of Bree Daniels, a call girl entangled in a murder investigation, earned her an Academy Award for Best Actress. Fonda's performance was not just technically masterful, it was raw, vulnerable, and deeply human. Critics lauded her ability to capture the internal complexity of a woman straddling the lines between empowerment and exploitation, performance and identity. The role was groundbreaking, not only for its psychological depth, but also for challenging the norms of female representation in cinema. This performance cemented Jane Fonda as a serious actress, unafraid to take risks. Throughout the decade, Fonda continued to select roles that reflected her deepening political consciousness and personal convictions. In Julia, 1977, she played playwright Lillian Hellman opposite Vanessa Redgrave, in a tale that traversed both artistic aspiration and the horrors of fascism. But perhaps most defining of her artistic and political peak was Coming Home, 1978, a Vietnam War drama in which she portrayed the wife of a soldier who falls in love with a paralyzed veteran, played by Jon Voight. The film, which tackled the psychological and emotional aftermath of war, was a direct reflection of Fonda's anti-war activism. It earned her a second Oscar and positioned her as an artist whose work was inseparable from the causes she championed. Her next triumph came with The China Syndrome, 1979, a thriller about a nuclear power plant accident. Released just days before the real-life 3 Mile Island nuclear disaster, the film's eerie prescience sparked national debate. Once again, Fonda used her platform to not only entertain, but provoke vital conversation about systemic corruption and environmental danger. The fact that she co-produced the film through her own company demonstrated her increasing agency in a male-dominated industry. Fonda's status as a box office draw was complemented by her groundbreaking influence off-screen. In 1982, she released Jane Fonda's Workout, a low-budget fitness video that unexpectedly became the highest-selling VHS of all time. The project, which began as a fundraising effort for her political PAC, transformed her into an unexpected icon of the health and wellness movement. It empowered countless women to embrace strength and self-care in an era still dominated by rigid beauty standards. The workout tapes, along with the accompanying books, records, and apparel, formed a fitness empire that further broadened her cultural reach. During this same period, Fonda's political activism was as fierce as ever. From her controversial visit to Hanoi during the Vietnam War to her outspoken support for civil rights, feminism, and environmental causes, she remained a lightning rod in American public life. While many stars avoided controversy to preserve their careers, Fonda leaned into it, believing that her platform carried responsibility. She endured fierce criticism and personal attacks, often being dubbed Hanoi Jane by her detractors, but never allowed the backlash to deter her from speaking out. On the personal front, the early 1980s also saw her navigating complex emotional terrain. Her marriage to political activist Tom Hayden was both a source of creative partnership and personal strain. Yet even within the turbulence, Fonda remained productive and fiercely committed to her vision. Her desire to merge personal truth with public action shaped every role, every speech, and every endeavor she undertook. By the mid-1980s, Jane Fonda was not just at the height of her fame, she was a force of nature. Her achievements in film, business, and activism had redefined what it meant to be a woman in the public eye. She had transcended the boundaries of Hollywood to become a cultural architect, someone who didn't just reflect the times, but actively shaped them. Whether she was gracing the cover of magazines, marching in protests, or accepting awards, Fonda represented a rare fusion of intelligence, courage, and charisma. In this era of peak influence, Jane Fonda wasn't merely a movie star. She was a movement, a catalyst, a mirror held up to society, challenging it to do better. And though the years to come would bring challenges and reckonings, the legacy she built during her prime would endure as a towering testament to the power of art in service of truth. Emerging from the shadows of personal turmoil and public controversy, Jane Fonda entered a profound phase of transformation, an era of rebirth that would redefine not only her career, but also her sense of self. The journey of her return was not sudden or theatrical, but rather a slow, introspective unfolding, shaped by years of reckoning with her past and a newfound desire for wholeness. This period marked the emergence of a more grounded, spiritually aware, and deeply empowered Jane Fonda, one no longer seeking validation from the outside world, but instead driven by authenticity, purpose, and inner peace. The first signs of her personal rebirth came in the 1990s, when Fonda made the difficult decision to step away from Hollywood and the public eye. She entered a period of retreat, focusing on family, therapy, and spiritual growth. It was during this time that she converted to Christianity, with not as a performative gesture, but as a sincere quest for meaning and healing. Her faith became a framework through which she could finally confront long-buried pain, the abandonment of her mother, the emotional distance from her father Henry Fonda, and her lifelong struggle to feel worthy of love. Therapy helped her connect the dots between her eating disorders, perfectionism, and the emotional voids she had spent decades trying to fill. In 2001, after a 15-year break from film, Jane Fonda made her acting comeback with Monster-in-Law, a comedic role opposite Jennifer Lopez. Though the film was lighthearted and commercially oriented, it served as a symbolic return for Fonda, reminding audiences that she remained a powerful force in entertainment. But this return to the screen was different. She was no longer seeking acclaim or control. Her priorities had shifted. Fonda now viewed acting as a vehicle for connection, fun, and financial support for her expanding activism, not as the centerpiece of her identity. At the same time, Fonda became increasingly vocal on issues of social justice, environmentalism, and women's rights. Her activism took on a new energy, less reactive, more strategic, and infused with wisdom from experience. In her 60s and 70s, she began traveling the country advocating for adolescent reproductive health and supporting organizations that empowered young girls. Her work with the Georgia Campaign for Adolescent Power and Potential, as well as the Women's Media Center, which she co-founded with Gloria Steinem and Robin Morgan, demonstrated that her activism had matured alongside her. Fonda's return to television in 2015, with the hit Netflix series Grace and Frankie, co-starring Lily Tomlin, became a cultural milestone. The show depicted two older women reclaiming their independence and identity after their husbands leave them for each other. It was sharp, funny, poignant, and quietly revolutionary in how it portrayed aging women with nuance and vitality. Fonda, now in her late 70s, was not playing a diminished or background role. She was a leading lady again, but this time on her own terms. Grace and Frankie introduced her to a new generation of fans and cemented her place as an enduring figure in popular culture. Perhaps the most striking symbol of her rebirth came in her 80s, when Jane Fonda launched Fire Drill Fridays, a series of weekly climate change protests held in Washington, D.C. Inspired by the young activist Greta Thunberg, Fonda became a powerful ally in the global fight against environmental destruction. Donning her now iconic red coat, she was arrested multiple times while protesting on the Capitol steps, undeterred by age or legal threats. These acts of civil disobedience were not publicity stunts. They were the culmination of a life lived in pursuit of justice, now powered by the urgency of time and legacy. In her memoir My Life So Far, and later in What Can I Do?, Fonda wrote with vulnerability, intelligence, and self-awareness about the arc of her life. The fame, the failures, the shame, the courage, and the growth. She emerged as a woman who no longer feared rejection or criticism, who had learned to forgive others and herself. Her honesty about aging, body image, regret, and redemption resonated deeply, especially with women who had watched her evolve over decades. Through public speaking, interviews, and her writing, she became not just a celebrity, but a teacher and spiritual elder of sorts, guiding others through the complexities of life transitions. Jane Fonda's return was never just about reclaiming the spotlight. It was about reclaiming herself. Her later years became a testament to the power of resilience, reinvention, and the belief that it is never too late to start anew. She had spent her youth trying to mold herself to fit others' expectations. Now, in her maturity, she radiated clarity, purpose, and unapologetic truth. This reinvention was not just a chapter. It was a renaissance, proving that the most powerful comebacks are born not from a desire to be seen, but from the courage to be fully, authentically oneself. Following her era of acclaim and cultural dominance, Jane Fonda entered a period marked by turbulence, controversy, and deeply personal crises. Her outspoken activism, particularly her opposition to the Vietnam War, placed her at the center of some of the most intense political storms of the 20th century. While her cinematic accomplishments were undeniable, her political stances, especially her infamous 1972 trip to Hanoi, sparked a backlash that would haunt her reputation for decades. The fallout from these actions, combined with personal and professional struggles, defined one of the most complex and challenging chapters in her life. The trip to North Vietnam, undertaken during the height of the Vietnam War, was intended to protest American bombing campaigns and to encourage dialogue for peace. While in Hanoi, Fonda visited hospitals, met with civilians, and recorded broadcasts calling for an end to the war. However, a photo taken during the trip, of Fonda seated on an anti-aircraft gun used to shoot down American planes, ignited a firestorm. Critics saw it as a betrayal of U.S. soldiers, and the image was weaponized to brand her as unpatriotic, even treasonous. Although Fonda would later express regret for the photo and acknowledge the pain it caused veterans, the Hanoi Jane label stuck, becoming a bitter symbol of the cost of her activism. This controversy overshadowed much of her work in the years that followed. Despite continuing to act in critically acclaimed roles, many Americans viewed her with suspicion or outright hostility. She received hate mail, threats, and was even blacklisted by certain institutions. Conservative politicians and media figures used her as a scapegoat for the frustrations of a divided nation, reducing her complex beliefs into sound bites of outrage. The emotional toll was immense. Fonda later admitted that the Hanoi episode had isolated her from parts of the public and industry, despite her intentions being rooted in compassion and a desire to stop the suffering caused by war. Simultaneously, Jane Fonda's personal life began to fracture. Her marriage to activist and politician Tom Hayden, though initially a partnership of shared ideals, began to unravel under the pressures of political life, parenthood, and diverging priorities. Their son, Troy Garrity, was often caught between two driven, often emotionally unavailable parents. Fonda, who had long struggled with issues of self-worth and a deep desire to please others, particularly men, began to feel the cracks in the foundation of her public and private identities. Professionally, the 1980s also presented a paradox. Her workout empire made her a household name in a completely new domain. But many critics and feminists questioned whether her fitness persona conflicted with her earlier feminist stances. Was she empowering women through health and self-discipline, or conforming to the same beauty standards she had once challenged? Fonda herself struggled with this dichotomy, often questioning whether her commercial success diluted the radical edge she once embraced. Additionally, Fonda's internal battles, many rooted in her early childhood, resurfaced during this time. She grappled with eating disorders, perfectionism, and the unresolved trauma of her mother's suicide when she was just 12 years old. For years she had buried her emotions behind activism, work, and relationships. But the psychological weight of these experiences eventually forced her to confront her pain. Therapy and self-reflection became crucial lifelines as she began to peel back the layers of her identity and recognize the toll that years of self-sacrifice, political battle, and emotional repression had taken. The controversies of this era, however painful, were transformative. They revealed the complexity of a woman who refused to be easily categorized, a Hollywood icon turned political firebrand, a feminist struggling with internalized misogyny, a perfectionist haunted by her past. Jane Fonda, during this period, was not merely a target of public anger. She was a mirror to a conflicted America, reflecting back its contradictions, hypocrisies, and wounds. It was during these years of crisis that Fonda began laying the groundwork for her eventual reinvention. She started to step away from the constant need to prove herself and began seeking a more authentic existence, one that embraced imperfection and vulnerability. But that journey toward healing and redefinition would not be linear or easy. The turbulence of her middle years tested her spirit, but they also gave her the depth, wisdom, and resilience that would define the final and perhaps most profound act of her life. Emerging from the shadows of personal turmoil and public controversy, Jane Fonda entered a profound phase of transformation, an era of rebirth that would redefine not only her career but also her sense of self. The journey of her return was not sudden or theatrical, but rather a slow, introspective unfolding, shaped by years of reckoning with her past and a newfound desire for wholeness. This period marked the emergence of a more grounded, spiritually aware, and deeply empowered Jane Fonda, one no longer seeking validation from the outside world, but instead driven by authenticity, purpose, and inner peace. The first signs of her personal rebirth came in the 1990s, when Fonda made the difficult decision to step away from Hollywood and the public eye. She entered a period of retreat, focusing on family, therapy, and spiritual growth. It was during this time that she converted to Christianity, not as a performative gesture, but as a sincere quest for meaning and healing. Her faith became a framework through which she could finally confront long-buried pain, the abandonment of her mother, the emotional distance from her father Henry Fonda, and her lifelong struggle to feel worthy of love. Therapy helped her connect the dots between her eating disorders, perfectionism, and the emotional voids she had spent decades trying to fill. In 2001, after a 15-year break from film, Jane Fonda made her acting comeback with Monster-in-Law, a comedic role opposite Jennifer Lopez. Though the film was lighthearted and commercially oriented, it served as a symbolic return for Fonda, reminding audiences that she remained a powerful force in entertainment. But this return to the screen was different. She was no longer seeking acclaim or control. Her priorities had shifted. Fonda now viewed acting as a vehicle for connection, fun, and financial support for her expanding activism, not as the centerpiece of her identity. At the same time, Fonda became increasingly vocal on issues of social justice, environmentalism, and women's rights. Her activism took on a new energy, less reactive, more strategic, and infused with wisdom from experience. In her 60s and 70s, she began traveling the country, advocating for adolescent reproductive health and supporting organizations that empowered young girls. Her work with the Georgia Campaign for Adolescent Power and Potential, as well as the Women's Media Center, which she co-founded with Gloria Steinem and Robin Morgan, demonstrated that her activism had matured alongside her. Fonda's return to television in 2015 with the hit Netflix series Grace and Frankie, co-starring Lily Tomlin, became a cultural milestone. The show depicted two older women reclaiming their independence and identity after their husbands leave them for each other. It was sharp, funny, poignant, and quietly revolutionary in how it portrayed aging women with nuance and vitality. Fonda, now in her late 70s, was not playing a diminished or background role. She was a leading lady again, but this time on her own terms. Grace and Frankie introduced her to a new generation of fans and cemented her place as an enduring figure in popular culture. Perhaps the most striking symbol of her rebirth came in her 80s, when Jane Fonda launched Fire Drill Fridays, a series of weekly climate change protests held in Washington, D.C. Inspired by the young activist Greta Thunberg, Fonda became a powerful ally in the global fight against environmental destruction. Donning her now iconic red coat, she was arrested multiple times while protesting on the Capitol steps, undeterred by age or legal threats. These acts of civil disobedience were not publicity stunts. They were the culmination of a life lived in pursuit of justice, now powered by the urgency of time and legacy. In her memoir My Life So Far and later in What Can I Do, Fonda wrote with vulnerability, intelligence, and self-awareness about the arc of her life. The fame, the failures, the shame, the courage, and the growth. She emerged as a woman who no longer feared rejection or criticism, who had learned to forgive others and herself. Her honesty about aging, body image, regret, and redemption resonated deeply, especially with women who had watched her evolve over decades. Through public speaking, interviews, and her writing, she became not just a celebrity, but a teacher and spiritual elder of sorts, guiding others through the complexities of life transitions. Jane Fonda's return was never just about reclaiming the spotlight. It was about reclaiming herself. Her later years became a testament to the power of resilience, reinvention, and the belief that it is never too late to start anew. She had spent her youth trying to mold herself to fit others' expectations. Now, in her maturity, she radiated clarity, purpose, and unapologetic truth. This reinvention was not just a chapter, it was a renaissance, proving that the most powerful comebacks are born not from a desire to be seen, but from the courage to be fully, authentically, oneself. Jane Fonda's legacy is as multifaceted as the life she has lived, spanning continents, industries, and ideologies. Few public figures have left such an indelible mark across so many domains: cinema, activism, fitness, feminism, and cultural transformation. Her influence is not confined to the roles she played or the movements she joined, but rather to the ways she consistently broke barriers, redefined expectations, and encouraged others, especially women, to examine their power, their voices, and their capacity for change. In the world of film and television, Jane Fonda stands as an icon of both critical acclaim and commercial success. With 2 Academy Awards, multiple nominations, and a body of work that includes classics like Clute, Coming Home, The China Syndrome, and 9 to 5, she reshaped the image of the female protagonist. She refused to be boxed into the traditional leading lady archetype, choosing instead to portray complex, intelligent, flawed, and resilient women. Her characters often challenged societal norms, particularly in the 1970s, a time when Hollywood was still steeped in patriarchal storytelling. As an actress, she elevated what it meant to be a woman on screen, not just beautiful or romantic, but political, principled, and often revolutionary. Yet Jane Fonda's legacy goes far beyond the screen. In many ways, her cultural influence is even more deeply felt in the realms of activism and social justice. A fierce advocate for civil rights, gender equality, Native American rights, and anti-war movements, Fonda redefined what it meant to be a celebrity in political discourse. Her most controversial act, her 1972 trip to Hanoi during the Vietnam War, remains one of the most debated moments in American political history. While she later expressed regret over the photo of her seated on an anti-aircraft gun, she never wavered in her conviction that the war was unjust. This principled stance, though divisive, laid the groundwork for later generations of celebrity activism, paving the way for artists who use their platform to speak out on global issues. Her feminism, too, has left a lasting imprint. As both a public thinker and private struggler, Fonda has always been open about her journey through the expectations and constraints placed on women, especially in regard to body image, motherhood, and emotional suppression. Her honest discussions about eating disorders, insecurity, and people-pleasing helped destigmatize conversations around mental health and female self-worth. Moreover, her co-founding of the Women's Media Center in 2005 was a strategic move to address gender bias in media representation, giving women the tools to tell their own stories and influence the cultural narrative. Another critical part of Jane Fonda's legacy lies in health and fitness. In the 1980s, she revolutionized the industry with her now legendary Jane Fonda's workout videos. While fitness tapes existed before her, none had captured the imagination or the bodies of women the way hers did. Her programs not only popularized home workouts, but also made physical empowerment accessible to millions of women. What set her apart was not just the exercise routines, but the underlying philosophy: taking ownership of one's body, asserting independence through physical strength, and building self-esteem from the inside out. In later years, Jane Fonda's environmental activism has become a defining feature of her legacy. Her Fire Drill Fridays movement, aimed at pressuring politicians to enact serious climate policy, showcased her unwavering energy and sense of urgency, even into her 80s. Her arrests while protesting on Capitol Hill symbolized not recklessness, but resolve, a refusal to let age or reputation become an excuse for inaction. For a generation grappling with the existential threat of climate change, Fonda's boldness serves as both inspiration and challenge. Fonda's influence is also deeply personal and intergenerational. She has mentored countless younger women in Hollywood and activism alike. From actresses like Lily Tomlin and Brie Larson to climate activists and feminist scholars, many have pointed to Fonda as a guiding force, someone who demonstrates how one can evolve without selling out, age without becoming irrelevant, and speak out without apologizing. Her openness about her flaws, regrets, and continuous growth offers a powerful counter-narrative to the myth of the finished product. She teaches that it's okay to change your mind, to admit your mistakes, and to start over again and again. Ultimately, Jane Fonda's legacy is not one of perfection, but of persistence. She has walked through fire, personally and politically, and emerged not only whole, but radiant in her complexity. Her story reminds us that a life well lived is not linear but layered. It includes triumphs and failures, love and loss, silence and voice. Jane Fonda has left behind a legacy not only of what she did, but of who she dared to become, and in doing so, she invites the world to do the same. Despite a life filled with accolades, activism, and adoration, Jane Fonda's greatest sorrow lies not in public controversy or political backlash, but in the deep, often unspoken wounds of her personal life. Behind her powerful image and unwavering public stance exists a woman who has endured profound emotional pain, rooted in a childhood marked by abandonment, self-doubt, and an aching yearning for love that would follow her for decades. Perhaps the most defining sorrow in Jane Fonda's life is the suicide of her mother, Frances Ford Seymour. Jane was just 12 years old when her mother took her own life while institutionalized. The trauma was deepened by the fact that Jane did not initially know the truth. She was told her mother had died of a heart attack. It wasn't until she read about it in a movie magazine months later that she learned the devastating reality. The shock of that discovery shattered her sense of safety and belonging. For years, Jane internalized the tragedy, believing she was somehow at fault, that she had been too difficult, too unlovable. That early wound shaped her struggle with self-worth and influenced her relationships with others, especially men, throughout her life. Compounding that grief was Jane's distant relationship with her father, legendary actor Henry Fonda. Though he was a giant of the silver screen, Henry was emotionally reserved and often cold at home. Jane longed for his approval and love, but rarely received the warmth or affirmation she craved. Their relationship was strained and complicated, marked by silence more than connection. It wasn't until late in his life, when they worked together on the 1981 film On Golden Pond, that some healing occurred. Ironically, that performance, where they played a father and daughter confronting emotional distance, reflected their own real-life dynamic. The film earned Henry his first Oscar, but for Jane, it symbolized something far more valuable: a sliver of reconciliation before his death. Still, the pain of years lost lingered. Another enduring sorrow in Jane Fonda's life is the internal torment she suffered due to her own feelings of inadequacy. Despite outward success, she has spoken candidly about decades of eating disorders, perfectionism, and crippling insecurity. She admits to having spent much of her life trying to mold herself into whatever others, especially the men in her life, wanted her to be. Her marriages to Roger Vadim, Tom Hayden, and Ted Turner were all colored by this pattern. Each relationship began with passion and promise, yet ultimately left her feeling diminished or invisible. She has since reflected on how she lost herself in those partnerships, sacrificing her own needs and desires in the hope of receiving love and validation. The breakup of her marriage to media mogul Ted Turner marked another moment of profound sadness. Though the relationship was marked by adventure and glamour, it was also fraught with emotional distance and incompatibility. Jane ultimately realized that while she loved him deeply, she could not continue to shrink herself to fit into his world. Their divorce in 2001, after 10 years of marriage, was painful but necessary for her self-liberation. Still, walking away from someone she loved, especially after building what she hoped would be her forever home with him, brought its own unique sorrow. Adding to her emotional burdens was the guilt and controversies surrounding her political activism, especially during the Vietnam War. While she never apologized for her anti-war beliefs, the fallout from her 1972 visit to Hanoi haunted her for decades. She has spoken about the shame and regret she felt over the infamous photo of her on an anti-aircraft gun, acknowledging how that image, however unintentional, hurt American veterans. Though she has done much to repair those relationships, the episode remains a scar in her public and private life. Yet perhaps Jane Fonda's greatest personal sorrow, one she has articulated with quiet vulnerability, is the feeling that she spent too much of her life living inauthentically. For years, she says, she lived from the outside in, constructing a public identity to mask inner emptiness. Only in her later years did she begin the deep, uncomfortable work of truly knowing and accepting herself. She has called this process of self-discovery painful but necessary, grieving the years she lost, pretending, pleasing, and performing just to feel loved. In her memoir and public interviews, Jane Fonda has laid bare these sorrows, not to elicit sympathy, but to offer solidarity. She understands that pain is not unique to her, that millions carry invisible burdens of childhood trauma, unmet expectations, and emotional absence. What makes her journey resonant is not that she suffered, but that she faced her suffering. She wrestled with it, unpacked it, and continues to grow beyond it. Jane Fonda's sorrow has shaped her, but it has not defined her. If anything, it has deepened her compassion, sharpened her insight, and empowered her to live with greater authenticity. In embracing her own pain, she has given countless others permission to confront theirs. Her life stands as a testament not just to the heights a person can reach, but to the valleys they can climb out of, with courage, honesty, and grace.